All right. So I wanted, even it's, especially for you, I want to do this anyway. And also recording it so that you can go back and revisit this because there's certain parts of the instructional routines that we're not getting the warm-ups. We're not really doing them, not just fidelity, but integrity of what the purpose are and why they were set up. So my goal is to turn this on, is to look at those instructional routines, which is really the warm-ups. Are we doing the warm-ups in such a way that it gets to the learning so students can walk away and understand them? So here's the warm-ups, all the different warm-ups. They call them the main part of the instructional routines. And what we're looking for is they still need to have them on chart paper. They still need to be on the board throughout the lesson. In fact, some of them may be beneficial to keep as an anchor chart. It's great to put scholars' names on there and use the scholar's name as a strategy. Let's use, Mr. Bundy's strategy, Paul's strategy. And it's great if they, keep them up all the time as an anchor chart, if possible, name that strategy, what we're trying to get at. And I'm going to show you examples of those. So I want to dig into each one of them, and you'll have access to this. So acting out, obviously, your kids are acting out some word problem situation, and what the teacher does, read the word problems, and the kids acting out the word problem. And in fact, in this situation, they're even developing the question, what are we looking for? So ideally, they need to be using manipulatives to represent this. And this, in acting out, and I know it's only kindergarten and first grade, that's an area of growth for us, where they're actually sitting down. If this is the warm-up, they need to be at their table. They can't be doing this on the carpet unless they have that manipulative on the carpet. Because they want to have 8 things and 3 moved away. And I know we acted out where we actually stand up and we have 8 people and then we move 3 of them out of the way as a good representation. But each child really needs to engage in acting it out instead of just watching it. Does that make sense? Choral counting. We do a lot of that choral counting. And the slideshow has the choral counting. And this says, the biggest thing is we need to record the choral counting. And we need to do it on a whiteboard or a chart paper. And I think that's a big reliance on the slides. So in the slides, we start the choral counting. We need to record it as they're doing it. They need to see where those numbers are coming from. And we do need to record it like it has it on the slides in a sense, because there's a purpose for it. At the end in the synthesis, they're asking, what patterns do you recognize? What additional patterns? So you look at this choral counting, for example, and we're choral counting by 5, right? So we're going 0, 5, 10, 50. Why did they do that? Instead of going across 0 to 5, 10, 50, they did it for a particular purpose, right? And they want you to see the patterns that's going on with the 10s and the 1s. And if you do the choral counting, and the kids are doing choral counting, and we're not recording it, we're not letting them look at that, but we're really just opening this up and say, okay, let's do it, at least point to it as they're choral counting it so they can see that. That gives help for our ML. Then you ask the question, and this is the synthesis question. What patterns do you see? And you see the tens place are moving. This is second grade choral counting. You see in the ones place is the same. That's what we want them to begin to think about. So this leads to a lesson that talks about tens and ones. And if we just do choral counting and then skip through it, we end up losing that little nugget of knowledge that's going to connect to the tens and the ones. And I think these are the kind of small little things that we need to think about.
It's like when you literally record 0 and 5.
Yes.
Write it out.
Yes, I would have to, because they need to see it. No number one. Some of our even second graders are having a hard time writing. Some of them are having a hard time skip counting. And they need to see it, you need to record it, and they need to follow you. Because right now, they're not choral counting, they're reading, right? All they're doing is they're reading. They know it, and that's not developing that skip counting idea of it, if you're just flashing this up. Does that make sense? Even if you just pause this on the back slide, all right, today we're doing choral counting, and change it, and then just do it up here, and then come back and say, the next slide, okay, look at the pattern. What do you notice? And have them really think. And this is a great turn and talk. And this activity takes 10 minutes. The 10-minute portion of it is this part, the majority of the time. The choral counting takes a minute or two.
Going back to the acted out, are they like literally, like what are they acting out? Like what's that look like?
In the book, ideally, individuals are doing it. They stand up, they do this, and 8 people, and they move them out, so they're physically acting out. But what's really going on is only those 8 kids are engaged in that acting out. What I'd love to see in the acting out is literally the map, the organization of that structure, like the chain structure, and this is for kindergarten. And they put 8 in, and then they move 3 manipulatives. I don't care if it's, whatever they are, connecting cubes. Just they move that. That's that acting out of removing, so they understand subtraction as takeaway or addition as put together. Does that make sense? They need to be physically moving things and acting things out. This is a big one I see a lot that we really bomb at. This estimation exploration is really a 3-act task. And as a 3-act task, you show them a picture and they make this estimate, right? And they're talking about it, which is too big, which is too small, which is about right. And then you move on and they show them another bit of information. Or they have this conversation, and in this description it says, focus on this, bring this out. So it's 2. And let me give you that example. Here's an image. What is an estimate that's too high? What's too big? Second grade again, sorry.
Yeah, I would definitely have some students that say $1 million, because they know
Right.
it's way too big, and I would say, well, we want something reasonable.
Right.
Say it
And,
now.
yeah.
And what is too low and what is about right. And you need to start with what's way too high, what's way too low, so they can guide their just right. So if you say it's about 100, too low is 100. It's less than 100. It's more than 100, right? This has got to be more than 100. And it's too high is 1,000. So you're getting into 3-digit numbers, right? In this one, you're beginning to break it apart in hundreds and thousands and millions. Wow, it couldn't even fill the whole room, right? And then now I want you to guess again and make the change, because in a 3-act task, when you give them additional information, they go back and fine-tune their estimate. That's the key. Is if you give them more information, can they go back in and make changes? That's how we learn estimation. That's why we're really bad at estimation, is because not only are we having a hard time orchestrating this, we don't spend a lot of time in helping them understand how to do that. So when you do add in the information, and they get to make the changes on that. In estimation exploration, they can't do this without writing. So there's going to be some parts you open up the book, some parts you can't open up a book. You can wing it, but to be honest with you, when they write and make a commitment, and that's the part of the 3-act task that Graham Fletcher is big on. When they write and say, I think it's this much, they're excited about it. They commit to it. And they're excited to figure out, well, how much is it? How close am I? Right? And then at the end, the 3rd act is they show them the result, or and most of the time it gives you the answer, right? So how much do you think it's in here? And I think when I looked at this, it was like 700 and something, right? So it's too low is in the 100, too high is over 1,000. So that gives you a range. Make a guess. Well, there's a lot of empty spaces or not, right?
Do you think doing that on an anchor chart? My students really like at the beginning of math.
Right.
We shifted to going to the rug so that way everybody is not doing anything else. It's after wellness, so we're refocusing, and it feels like the start of the day because we do that for the EL. And so they really like that. But if I was doing an anchor chart and put their name next to their estimate, that would that?
You could do that. Somehow we got to record them, but then you want to give them an opportunity to change their estimate.
Yeah.
Who wants to change their estimate?
Sure.
In most cases, this, even if you do it on the carpet, and say, okay, we're going to do the warm up on the carpet, and then we're going to go back on. If you do this on the carpet, then go back at the end and say, okay, before I tell you what the estimate is, what the real number is, I want you to put, we just talked about it. I want you to put what you think is too low. I'll give you too low. 100, 1,000. Use that information and make the guess.
I was gonna ask the same thing, like, is it the teacher annotate somewhere when all their numbers that they're spitting out, or put
Yes.
a name or initial
Yeah.
or something?
And that's
But that's important for the kids too, right?
in this case, that's what the kids. All right, what do you think is too low? 55, and then you record. You want to get to that 100. And what do you think is too high?
Yeah, they
You
always.
want to get to it. What do we all agree upon? We think, well, I think it's 100. It's too low. It's got to be more than 100, right? And that conversation is really helpful. In this example is maybe not a great example, but it's an example of it, right?
What's your thought on,
No, please.
what's your thought on how far, because you want to give kids voice and let them do what they want, like how far do you let them go? Because we've seen like, one will say 1 and then 2 and 3 and then go on for an hour. So like
Right.
how far, how much guidance do you give them as a teacher
What-
when they're estimating and going and all that?
You hope.
Or do you, I mean, because you let everybody respond, you can be there all day, like from 1 to maybe like higher or lower.
Yeah,
like, how much conversations?
I'll almost always get somebody that says 0, and I'll say, now wait a minute, is that a reasonable
Right.
estimate? Because we can see that there's more than 0, so that's not really reasonable.
Right.
Let's make it reasonable. And then for too high, they'll think of the biggest number they know, which is usually 1 million. And I'll say, no, wait a minute, is that reasonable? And that's I try to, but again, yeah, it can go on.
If you get into that situation, this is a great opportunity for, hey, let's talk to your partner or do a triad, and you all decide what you think is too low. So you give them that opportunity to have voice because everybody wants to say it, and then you can call on a couple of those. So you're minimizing this. We're throwing numbers. Right now we're wildly guessing.
Yeah.
And the first act. The second act, we're trying to get them to think reasonably about numbers and depth of numbers, or the range of numbers. Thank you, that's the word I was looking for. The range, and trying to really understand it. So that then you give them the new information, and then they can go back, and we're done with this, right? Go back and make your final estimate. Open up your book to page whatever, and as they're doing that, they write in the final estimate, and you're watching them, or it's already opened, and then you can give them, well, it's 759. How many of y'all got close to that, right? Or you could do it fun way, keep your hands up, and put your hands down if it goes above 500. It's more than 5. Oh, I chose 450. Then my hands go down, or some other engaging activity that you want. How many do you see? This is another instructional routine that is in the warm-up. We don't do this. We show them and keep the slide up. This is a quick image. It's a flash. And the goal is to supersize, to see fives and how many groups of fives, right? So we end up showing it and then realize after we orchestrated it, it would have been better if I would just flashed it and went back. So we want them to supersize it. This you don't have to do with the book. This literally, they could be on the carpet. we go bang, bang, and then you get some estimates. Or say, how did you see it? Well, I know there's 5 because it looks like dice. Well, great. Let's see if you can use that strategy, Paul's strategy, for the next one. And that's the goal of it, right? And then you go to the next one, and then the next one, and using Paul's strategy or whoever's strategy. So I think this one, we got to think about how we're orchestrating this one. You know, how many do you see? Quick image, get estimations from the class before you show them. I just want to make sure it's still recording. Sorry, guys. Yeah, we're still recording. Before you show them, record the different numbers, right? And then how did you see them would be the next one. Notice and wonder. What do you notice? What do you wonder? We've done this as a part of one of the 3 acts. You show them the image. They think of notices and wonders. You write down their notices, write down their wonders. You really focus on the wonders, the question. You focus on the question. That's going to lead to the content, you know, the whole lesson. So you answer some of these questions like, you know, I noticed at the time it's a little video. I noticed he had a watch on. Oh, did he have a watch on? Yes, he had a watch on. You answer those questions, except the question is like, well, that's a really good question. And that's going to lead us to think about what we're going to be doing. Let's see if we can come back and answer that question at the end. You can or cannot. I mean, you don't have to, but the idea is you choose that question that's going to lead to that conversations in the next activity. A number talk. We're still orchestrating this a little differently. Although the slides does a pretty good job, they put up one number at a time. You solve it mentally. You can do that on the carpet.
Yeah, we have to do it that way. If we do it with our books, they try to do them all themselves.
Right.
And yeah.
And that, I see that done pretty well. The idea behind it is you want to promote an identified strategy. You got to read the little text to say, this is for this reason, right? And then you use that identified strategy. So I took a snippet. Here's kind of the conversation that you can look at. But you start off with the 30 and plus 10, and they're giving you some strategies. And some kid says in the identified strategy, it's 3 10s plus 1 more 10, which, and again, I think this is first grade, and they're working on 10s and adding and subtracting by 10s. So 3 10s plus 1 more 10, that's skip counting. And then, well, let's use, Mark's strategy with this one. Can you do that? Oh, it's 4 10s plus 1 more 10. Or here, it's 8 10s minus 1 10. And it kind of gives you that in the script. But to be honest with you, we record all the different strategies. And then when we get to here, we skip it, or it's time, and then we move on, but really never connect to this identified strategy they want us to pull out. And that's what we need to do a little bit more. Each number talk series of expressions are done intentionally to get to a particular strategy. Questions about us, this is kind of key. This is where you look at, all right, how many people like pizza? How many people like hot dogs, hamburgers? And you create a little data. I think you did that. Well, first grade did that when they collected data and they were doing the data. Everybody gives that information. You don't need the book. I don't think there's a spot for it. Then there's a graph, and then they develop a notice of wonder. And then you ask whatever that script is, which could be in that situation that I looked at, an addition problem. Well, how many people like both hot dogs and hamburgers? And let's add them together. That's the question, right? And I haven't seen this really orchestrated, so I can't say how we're doing on it. And then you record their thinking. You always recording their thinking. True and false. This again, these are expressions that come out on the board, and are they true or false, right? And the goal behind them is really not to compute them. So you don't want the book, you don't want them to answer, this side is 7, this side is 8, so it's not equal, right? What you want them to do is sit on the carpet and have that conversation of why they think that this is equal or not equal.
Yeah,
And
they
think
like that.
about that, huh?
They do like that one, and we always talk about why.
Yeah.
Why do you think?
And then there's an identified strategy in most of them. We're adding one more, taking away one, and it gives you, the range with it. Or it's 7 plus 2, and this is 10 minus 1. Well, it's all around 9, and you can take one away, add a couple here. It's kind of solving it, but you're promoting a strategy that's written within it. Which 3 go together? This is the ode. Which one doesn't belong? Which one doesn't belong? They didn't like it because of the language around it. They really wanted it inclusive. But the whole idea is to show the image. The book is optional, and you can come. Every combination. There's 4 of them. Every combination possible has a reason for it not belonging, or putting them together, if you want to call it like that. Every one of them could be isolated, and you want to bring out those specific identified strategies of why these don't go together, or why these 3 belong. And this is a great opportunity to use language, to use that precise language. You want to hear that language. They're not lines, they're sides or vertices.
Yeah, they like that one, and when we first were doing it, they would think that theirs was the only right answer, and after we had several of them, then they realized, oh, there's something about almost every one of them that can definitely be the right answer. And then I would get to, well, nobody picked this one. How does, how
Right.
do the other ones differ from,
This one, you gotta go quick, because the intended identified strategy or the intended conversation they may want may not pop up in a sense that you want it to pop up.
Sure.
So you might go, okay, can anybody tell me why these 3 go together? If they're all choosing the most obvious one,
Sure.
right? Think about that from a math lens. As a mathematician, why do you think these 3 could be put together? And that might help. These are the majority of it in terms of the instructional routines that we're working on. I know there's a couple more embedded in the activities, and some of those are more of the language routines that we're going to get into besides the sentence stems that we talked about, or they talked about yesterday. And I wanted to just go over the language routines. I'm going to have these available on the slides that you guys can take a look at, and then kind of give you an example, a definition of how to orchestrate that each time, so you can look and collect and display, which is where you walk around. I wanted to really hone in on this. It's a great opportunity to walk around, record the language, the vocabulary, and then write it up. Okay, in our conversation today, we talked about addition and subtraction. I heard the language put together or take apart, or that addition is the same opposite of subtraction. Record that language, so that in the activities, you're actually doing the second activity. You want to continue to hear that language. What we did in 5th grade, for example, is we gave them almost sentence frames of what do we want to hear when I'm walking around. That's a great statement to talk about. All right, you guys do activity 1 here. You set up activity 1. I want you to work with partners. As I'm walking around, what should I be hearing? Instead of you telling them, well, what should I be hearing, real quick? And you can say, here's a sentence frame. I think these 2 belong together because, and then you give them that. And I want to hear that conversation. And then when you synthesize it, you go back to that sentence frame, and they'll say, oh, because they fit together, because they're even. Oh, say that sentence again, so that they get used to using that sentence frame. Does that make sense? All of them are up here so that we can dig into them. What I'd like to do is clean that up a little bit. What I'd like to do is really hone in on one, take a video of how it's orchestrated, and share that out as an example. Make sense? Any questions? I've spent all this time, I'm sorry.
I was gonna ask, like, I think with the training I went to, they were talking about building that math community. It's kind of like a norms or something, and you're right, kind of, as you go through, I think the training I was in. But I was trying to think, when you go around, like, what should I be seeing? Is that stuff that should be recorded on, like, that math community as we build? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
The anchor chart of the
It was like an
math?
anchor chart, yeah. The lady built it with us at the summer training, and it was like really establishing like the math community and what that looks like when you do math and things like that. So I was thinking that might be a point where you could reference back to that, or even if we have those, I don't know if we do in rooms or not. But that was something we did in our training. And then my second question would be, like you said, record a lot, those kind of things. So, like as you, we're talking about, like always, are we communicating? We want anchor charts or on boards if you got to, or freeze the screen, come back to it. Like what do we think is best for recorders?
I'm trying to get teachers to use anchor charts.
Paper.
Or the whiteboard, and it stays up on the whiteboard. Fourth grade, fifth grade, stays up on the whiteboard. In third grade, kick letters, but you know, they teach math and solely math. So it stays up on the whiteboard throughout the whole lesson.
Yeah, I think from my class, we came up with a list of things that mathematicians do because they're very pumped about being a mathematician, and so we'll look at that list and we'll talk about that. And I think what I could do that would, and I've done a little bit of it, but I could do more. Put up an anchor chart when the words that mathematicians use. They got very excited about decomposing and using that word. I would say, well, there's a word I'm thinking of that would go with what we're doing right now. Can anybody think of it? And they got to where they all will say it now. And I think if I was adding those words and say we need to try to use these words when we're talking, if we want to sound like mathematicians.
Yeah, and that's the what is that? Collect and display.
Yeah, I think that would be an easy way for me to connect them because they already know that that's the list of things that we know, and they came up with it. But it's a pretty good list of things that a mathematician does.
And going back to your question, all these, if you think about it, require our kids to talk to each other, how they talk to each other, and what language they use, and the whole protocols around taking turns with each other is the only way they're going to really build understanding in this curriculum. It is not a curriculum that's so scripted in a sense that here's what I do, then we do, and then you go and do it on your own. And they've got to pull out the math concepts in their conversations to lead them to do that, collecting specific language that you want to hear, giving that up front that you want to hear, that kind of hones in some of that conversations around it, and helps us become mathematicians. Mathematicians use precise language to explain their thinking. I gotta work on it.
How long is like this? I guess the warm up should take.
The warm-ups
Yeah.
should take between 10 to 12 minutes. I mean, it's all written around 10 minutes, but it might take a couple extra minutes.
And then if does IM give you like does it recommend which ones to use, or is it kind of free for a teacher to choose based on what you're getting into? So I say, like, what's a good place for us to start if we're not doing that? Should we focus on one, or should we decide that before we get into our unit, which ones to use, or instead of doing like one every day?
They're doing one every single day. It's the warm-up every single day. They do a 10-minute warm-up that's scripted.
And will it say use collect and display on this one, or is that our choice?
Oh,
or yeah.
The collected
Or-
display
or,
and the
yeah.
math language routines.
Or acted out, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So
No, I'm talking two different things. Like
yes.
Language routines. I'm talking about like the acted out, and
the
everything
instructional
else.
routines,
Yeah.
those are in the warm-ups.
So it recommends which one to use.
They tell you exactly which one they want to use. If they read the script above them, tells you what to look for, and I think that's the area of growth for us. The language routines are embedded within the activities. Some are specific that say use this stronger and clearer.
Okay.
So that means, but if you walk in there and you don't see kids talking a couple of times, then they're not doing it. What that is they're answering a question, they go and share their thinking with a student, they go back and change their thinking, they go share it with another one, and then they go back and back to back face to face, or that what is that EL protocol where they do they walk around, find a partner, talk to each other, answer a question, then walk around some more and do the same thing.
A tea party or
Yeah, it might be, but regardless, it's the opportunity to review, edit your thinking, and then continue to share your thinking while you're thinking. We're not doing that. We might turn and talk, and then, okay, let's move on or answer the question, but we're not giving them that time to change their thinking, to take what they learned and embed it. Some of these math language routines are suggested for our MLs, and that's where I really want to hone in on. If it says support for MLs, we have so many MLs, we really need to be considering including that in our regular instruction. What I think we could focus on in terms of your conversations, effectively orchestrating the warm-up, because that's one of the things that they're looking for in December. So in December, let's really dig into each warm-up and see if we can effectively orchestrate that would lead to the good activity within the lesson. So imagining, I mean, Paul, you probably done some warm-ups and you think, okay, that was fun, but it was disconnected from the lesson. In reality, that's rare. There's a purpose for each one of them. They spend a lot of time on them. And are we missing that key point? Does that make sense?
sure.
If we can really effectively orchestrate the warm-up so that we can get that bit of knowledge to get started with the lesson, that'd be a great place to go, let's say in December, and then in January, really kick in on these math language routines and making that a part of the look forward, making that a part of orchestrating. And that's where I can come in and say, okay, I'm going to be looking for these math language routines, and all right, it's going to be in lesson 14. Let me come in and orchestrate and help model that so we can record it and share it out with everybody. That makes sense? I'll send this out before you leave. Any other questions?
Sorry.
No, you're great. Before we leave, I need you. This is the only one here.
Is this for today or for all week?
All week, pick out. Yeah. Oh, put yours in there. Let's do that
Right,
again.
yeah.
Since you're here, you should. You could look for yours. I need you to pick out 3 names.
Being recorded for validation.
Yeah. Oh, that's out.
Got a pass.
Yeah. All right. Our winners are. Oh, that's fantastic. Miss Parr, Miss Catlett, and Miss Cox. That's fantastic. And they'll get the prizes. Thank you all.